What is up, everybody? Welcome to the analysis video for the PMPL South Asia Super Weekend number 1, day number 3. So the final day of the first Super Weekend. I'm indeed sorry I missed the analysis video and watching the games for day number 2. I had things to do in my own life. It is what it is, but I'm back. And I hope you can, of course, enjoy this video, enjoy the analysis. Let's jump right into it. So the first clip of game 1 is to do with this fight between CLxBablu and Future Station. I'm not exactly sure who crashed on who. I believe Future Station crashed onto CLxBablu. But I love the way CLxBablu initially reacted to this, because this kind of compound, we just, one kind of longish building and one small building, isn't really good for a full squad to massively control. You have the edge of the cliffside here, which is pretty good, but it still isn't really the strongest for a whole team to massively contend with. So what does CLxBablu do, which is absolutely fantastic to begin with? Danny gets himself into a vehicle and drives over to a flank position. Because there's no real need to have a full squad there. So he drives around, thinks, okay, I'm going to get into a bit of a flank position. That's great, because that puts a lot more pressure on the Future Station. They know that vehicle's there. So they know that they have less room to maneuver around. They have less room to breathe. They have less freedom to turn something into an engagement. This gives all the control over to CLxBablu. And it pays off. A nade here, a nade there. A bit of a nade everywhere, so to speak. You'll see it as the game goes on. And Future Station know they can't really do too much about it. And Danny is kind of looking around, keeping scout as well, keeping an eye on Future Station. He's doing a fantastic job. Now, Zibian opens the engagement up with a knock on the magnet, which is great. But that should be the instant response for Danny to get into his vehicle and full send it into the smoke area where Future Station are, while the rest of the team go on foot. They have the body advantage. They can afford to trade massively. And you can see 420 Boy wants to do that, but there's no real response from the rest of his team. If you're going to do that, you kind of need to do that as a duo, or like with Danny in that flank position here, he should be full sending it. Take control of it. But instead, he gets knocked by C-Wine. Okay? By Wine. And you gotta think that if Danny had a full center into that area, Wine would have been distracted. Therefore, there's a big chance that he wouldn't have gotten the knock on the 420 Boy. So that's where it's all well and good going for a flank position. It was great by Danny initially. But if you can't then react swiftly off the back of an initial knock of fantastic suppression, you close that door. Now, in the end, CLxBablu win the fight. Future Station, give them credit where it's due. They take the fight to CLxBablu. They push up onto that building, because they know that, it's a little bit of an even fight, because Danny hasn't joined up with them. Yes, he's a bit of a threat from an off angle, but it's not the same kind of threat as if he's much closer to the rest of his team. Future Station end up losing it, and Clarity do come out on top. But just that little bit of a moment, Danny could have made a world of difference, which would have made the fight quicker for CLxBablu, would have made their rotation into kind of phase 3, or preparation into phase 3 a little bit quicker, and overall just a smarter execution of a team fight. Something for them to think about. This next clip from game 1 is very much a WTF moment from I8 that I was really left scratching my head and wondering why they felt the need to pull this off. They had made a fantastic rotation on Phase 3 in this game, which will show up right now. Then Phase 4 did, to a certain extent, decide to kick them absolutely in the face. Definitely unfortunate. But when that kind of Phase 4 shift comes along and you are on way far in the northwest, it's still only Phase 4. The teams that are around the area of where Phase 4 shifted to are already solidified, and it's still fairly early in the game. But what I find absolutely crazy is no more than a minute or two later, as the blue zone of Phase 4 is closing in, I8 send their whole squad into the river. Absolutely whole squad into the river. Phase 4, when there's still nearly 50 people alive for them. 47 people alive in Phase 4, 17 minutes. And they felt the need to send their whole squad into the river. That's a massive commitment. A river push in these kind of circles is very much desperate times call for desperate measures, a last resort, a do or die moment, a survival of the fittest. They have a full squad. Maybe sending one player into the river to get information on a vehicle. Hey, I get that because you're trying to scout it out a little bit more. There's a sacrificial lamb standpoint, but the whole squad is absolutely not needed from I8 in that moment. And it was a sign of negativity, a sign of no plan B, no plan C. If you're going to make that kind of wide rotation on Phase 3, outside of hoping that the circle sticks in your favor, you've got to have a plan B and you've got to have a plan C for a hard shift in the opposite direction. I8 didn't have that, and that was massively exposed with that full sent into the riverside. For this last clip of game number 1, I want to focus a little bit on T2K and specifically Suyog and how much of a wonderful job he did for his team on his own. Yes, Train to Kill were definitely lucky that the circle went in their direction. But it's one thing when the circle comes towards you. It's about what you do as a team to control that end game, right? And yes, there's a benefit to the fact that there's a river around them. There's water, there's roads. It's quite difficult to really push in onto Train to Kill's position. But Suyog doesn't take that for granted. Right from the end of Phase 6, and a little bit earlier, he's kind of on his own in this top of the kind of roof looking over, but he's taking consistent pot shots, continually slowing down and suppressing his opponents. You have high voltage heading into the water. He chucks out a grenade, fire shots. You can see that he's on his own. His two teammates, Legend and Jane, are together. His other teammate is also on his own. Phase 7 pops up. He's, I think, just about either on the edge or outside the circle, but you can see it just doesn't continue to stop. And because of his suppression, 5 to 10 seconds earlier, they send high voltage onto the other side of the bridge, which loses a player from high voltage. As I fast forward, you can see Suyog continues to lay the pressure and slow down S9 across the board. It was a wonderful end game from Train to Kill as a whole, but to be honest, specifically for Suyog, that was some class proactivity from you, my friend. A blueprint of how a player should play the end game when the circle favors them. The first clip of game number 2 is a bit of a small one, but it had a definitely lasting impact for A1 in this Miramar game. Their 4-man spread on the north side of Los Leones is beautifully executed. The north side of Los Leones has that kind of, you know, that high ground area. It's not massive high ground, but it's pretty solid high ground, and it gives them a great overwatch onto that road between Los Leones and La Bandita and the kind of rocky area to where vibes are at the moment. And the phase 2 happens to kind of shift down in the southeast towards their direction. And it's not like they do a huge amount of killing from that area. But again, it's a fantastic starting point for them getting information, reacting to the next circle shifts, and just building up the fountain of knowledge, which helps them execute this game 2 in Miramar. I had to point that out. It's really great positioning for phase 2 from A1. So this next clip from Miramar is the fight between Raw and Future Station. Now, Future Station low-key had to let Raw enter into the compound via the warehouse because one of their players had been knocked. So it's really kind of pointless going for an engagement or a bit of a defense when one of your players is knocked down. So they got the revive up and Raw kind of enter, and it's a great entry point by Raw. They're proactive upon their movement. But this is where Future Station really kind of failed to use their intuition, or they kind of fail to utilize whatever experience they have in competitive. Magnet gets knocked, which is definitely a pain in the butt for Future Station. But Raw don't push it. The reason why Raw don't push it, or they're a little bit cautious to push it, is because they don't have a full squad up. So although they have a player knocked, it's still not that full advantage. It's still not that full, hey, we can really go for it. Because they've entered through kind of the warehouse, the side, they haven't gathered all of the information on where Future Station are. But the main thing is that they aren't up as a full squad. So that should say to Future Station, we're not getting pushed. We're able to get the revive off. Maybe this team doesn't have a full squad. And phase 6 Blue Zone is closing in. It's not going to get any easier. There's no guarantee that the circle is going to stay inside this compound. Time's ticking by. Magnet gets revived up. One of the big mistakes I feel that Future Station make is that CLxBablu is behind the wall of that building instead of being behind or just beside the wall of the warehouse. The reason why that wall of the warehouse is a little bit more advantageous is not only does it give them more visual or audio, should I say, information on how the Raw players are moving around, but it also gives them that extra little bit of aggression, a little bit more proactivity, a bit more of a pushback onto the Raw players, which will slow them down. So instead he stays prone down where he is. Now Entry is doing a pretty good job of pushing those pre-fire shots in the direction of Raw. But here's the thing. Here's the dirty little kind of secret and big mistake number 2 that Future Station make as he cooks up a grenade or thinks about cooking up a nade. Biggest mistake that Future Station make in this fight is that Entry is on his own. There's absolutely no counter frag potential from Future Station. There's absolutely no real support for Entry. When you have a full squad up and you have one player in the front line, that's a no-go. Like, I'm left kind of wondering, what is Magnet doing? Yeah, okay, he might be getting a bit of information on the teams that are, you know, further into the circle where phase 7 is just popped. But it doesn't matter when you can't clear out the team that's directly behind you. They know. They know that they're in. They know that they're there. And Joker is able to make it into the side of the building, cooks up a nade, pushes Magnet back, and Raw are the ones to eventually push. They're the ones to eventually be aggressive because they know that, oh crap, the next circle is shifted. We're now outside of it. We have to make a move. Right? Now, that's initially good because Baba does get a knock on the Joker. But then BlaBlaBla, because he's with Joker, pushes together. Now, Bishal could have been a bit more aggressive or a little bit quicker to join up with BlaBlaBla, but either way, it's not too bad. Wine gets knocked, so it's still a 2v2. Magnet is going for the revive, which is just the worst call. Phase 7 Blue Zone is starting to close in. You're in a kind of a 2v2 fight. Absolute no-go in my eyes. Absolute no-go. Okay, the revive is executed. But Bishal comes in, BlaBlaBla gets knocked, which is definitely very good for Magnet. I'll give him that element of credit. But then Bishal gets knocked, another knock comes in. Bishal is doing so well, such a good job. It's in this 1v1. As he's able to pull off a first aid, which should be also an automatic no for Magnet. He's looking to go for the revive, which is, I don't know if he had any heals. I don't know if he did. I'll hopefully be able to say. But Bishal is being so progressive, and it's just that last second thing that is just a very, very unfortunate that Raw lost that fight. But with all due respect, there's so many elements where Future Station did not deserve to win that fight. Instead of Magnet going for the revive, for example, he could have pulled off a first aid. At least by winning that fight, that would have been at least a bit more of a justification, because it was like, okay, I got the first aid, I'm up to 75% health. That's valuable. But instead, trying to go for a revive when the Blue Zone is closing in is a no-go. Future Station, although they won that fight, low-key didn't deserve to. And they got definitely very, very lucky with how little health Magnus survived with. I know that was a long one, but I think it was an important fight to break down. So the first clip of Game 4 is another kind of WTF moment from i8. And look, everybody has their bad day, but I was once again left both scratching my head and kind of screaming at my computer screen while watching it, going, why are you doing this? Phase 2 shifts to Phase 3, which is a very awkward circle shift for a lot of teams, right? And no doubt it was never going to be the easiest of rotation into the circle for i8. But they make the weirdest call. Not only because before Phase 3 pops, i8 are already on their way across the Western Bridge. But what they do is they turn around and they opt to go the opposite direction, committing to a military island position. Now, I'm okay with that if they wanted to send one player swimming across onto the mainland as once again as a bit of a sacrificial lamb. I can maybe get that in a tiny, tiny way, but by sticking to military island, you have a circle that is 40 to 50% of mainland, 25% 25 to 30% water, and you've got 10% military island. The chances of the next circle going down south is minuscule, or staying in military island is absolutely minuscule. i8 put themselves in such a bad position for late game control. It's crazy. They end up having to swim across. They get taken out by Stalwart. The IGLing decision for that, where they're already halfway across the Western Bridge nearly, and they turn around, just still boggles my mind. They could have played on the cliffside. That is valuable high ground information. You can get all the information in the world, right? It may not be Phase 4 fantastic position where it can shift away, but it gives them so much more information that they're able to work with Whereas sticking to the military island, you might get a bit of information, but you're backing yourself into a corner. Just silly decision making from i8. This next clip for game number 3 is just to highlight Stalwart's fantastic proactivity by the beach side. Again, these circles were definitely very awkward, but Stalwart had been in the kind of position where one of their players are for phase number kind of 4, or phase 5 should I say. And the blue zone's starting to close in, so what they did was they sent one player to that kind of southwestern edge of the circle, have 2 on the southeastern edge of the circle and 1 further back. And what I absolutely love is, as you play, is they're not taking for granted that people aren't coming from the beach side. They're covering all the areas. Blade gets knocked. They have so much information, turns around and gets a knock onto Raw Sada. This is really great proactive play from Stalwart. Shows fantastic awareness, fantastic communication, just overall really good teamwork. And Stalwart as a whole for the whole day, this is really an example of how they played on multiple games today. But that specific moment by the beach side was really class to watch. So this next clip from game number 3 is once again, and I'm sorry that Future Station seems to be the team that I'm highlighting in a bit of a negative way. Multiple clips in one analysis video, but it is what it is. You have Trained to Kill. The circle is shifted away from them. Okay. Future Station do have an initially pretty good spread in front of them, right? Now, Trained to Kill know that their real entry point into the circle is difficult. Very, very difficult. But what I like is that they kind of commit to one area. Future Station should know absolutely damn well that there's a team coming from the dip, because smokes are starting to lay down. They're certainly not their own smokes, so they have to be in other teams. But what do? They all stay prone down. They should even start to hear the sound of a vehicle kind of moving around them. Utility flying, and they do absolutely nothing really in front of them. I think Magnet is looking in the direction of S9. As far as I know, he might be, or he was. But either way, there's really nothing from Future Station. They lay down and they just let themselves get beat up, so to speak. Now, this isn't the cleanest of engagements from Trained to Kill. 110%. Suyo does open things up and gets a knock on the Magnet. But instead of some kind of real response from Future Station, whether it's utility, whether it's just kind of like taking a chance, Magnet goes close to his teammate who goes for the revive. Wine gets knocked straight away, and it's just such an easy fight for Trained to Kill. Now, Jade makes a mistake on his own, and that's a bad flank from him on his own when his team isn't really ready to follow him up from another angle. So Magnet gets dropped, and in the end, the fight ends up with both teams going out extremely quickly. Legend survives for a split second, but he gets taken out with the blown up vehicle. So Future Station just played very passively in that fight, and it's shades of what they did in the fight against Raw in the Miramar game. Teams have got to realize in a competitive setting, it's either kill or be killed. And I would much rather see, as a caster, as a fan of teams improving and getting better, I would much rather see a team take the fight and lose that fight than not take that fight at all and still lose that fight. Gotta grow some balls, teams. You know, And that moment with Future Station was a massive F. I'm sorry, guys. So this first clip from Game 3 is just to highlight how important it is to react much quicker when it comes to the circle shifts, and just really how much more aware you need to be in these games. Paradox end up getting engaged upon and squad wiped roughly around 12 minutes into the game as the blue zone of phase 2 starts closing in. Showing you up on screen, this is where Paradox were when phase 2 popped up. Between that time and now, they had over 2 minutes to make a move. Now, on one hand, I'm wondering why they didn't hear the noise that had been made in the fight between Stalwart and Future Station earlier on in this compound. But either way, to leave it so late into phase 2 to start moving in Sanhok, you are asking for trouble. And Stalwart deal with them so quickly. Even just the path that they move around just gives them no real area of cover. So between the timing and between the actual pathing, it's really poor from Paradox. And just like that, one single nade gets rid of them. You've got to react quicker to the circle shifts in Sanhok. You can't presume that they're going to stay in your direction. If you want to stay there, stay there. If you want to move, you move quickly. Smarter, quicker, better. So the last clip of game number 3 is just to highlight the wonderful proactivity from Train to Kill. It's ironic because I highlighted it when they had this circle in game 1. This is a circle where they don't really have it in their control. I'm going to show you a bit of an overview of where they were towards the start of phase 6. And they're on top of the hill, and they start moving their way down. Between Sandesh, you know, being in the sniper tower for a bit of time, between them constantly moving around, they kind of carve a bit of an entry point into the circle. But it's the fact that they're constantly moving around, they're not proning, they're jumping up, they're looking for players around them, gives them so much more strength as a team. Now, Vibes are doing a great job of defending behind them, and there's nothing really that kind of Vibes can do too much, because taking too many fights at once can compromise their own end game. But for Train to Kill specifically, the fact that they're constantly moving around and getting a sense of everybody around them, they clean up the last player of A1. They know that the next circle is about to pop, or it's just pop, should I say. And yes, it's a little bit lucky that it's headed in their direction a bit. But honestly, even if the circle moved away from them, with how proactive they've been up until that point, and the spirit that they have as phase 7 pops up, honestly, I've no doubt that they still would have won that game. It's just a sign that, you know, you move, you get information, you play with purpose. It pays off. And for Train to Kill, it was massive for them in that Sanhok game. Really well executed. The first clip of game 1 that I want to touch upon is just the narrowness of Wizzes' position in this phase 1. They dropped the Milta, which is all well and good, but that's a very kind of northern phase 1. And when you have Lumberyard and kind of Shelter Hill and in front of you, directly in front of you, you kind of want to scope that out relatively early into the game. The phase 1 is just starting to close out, and they're still in Milta, and they haven't really moved out. It's not much, but when you're talking about information as power and you want to do something with that, and you don't want to be going in blind, even in phase 2, Wizzes with vibes could definitely have done a bit more to send one vehicle across the lumberyard hill to look towards kind of shelter prison direction, look to the east, look to the west, just to get a bit of an idea of what's in front of them, to be proactive and prepare more heavily for phase 2. So this next moment from game number 5 that I want to touch upon is the engagement between Deadeye's guys and Raw. It was a little bit of ups and downs from Raw, but for the most part, a very well executed engagement. They open up the fight with a knock on the fragster. And they do what I don't see that much from teams, which is they push upon it. And what they do initially do great is they keep Sada kind of on the back line as a bit of support, just to kind of overwatch scout for his team, because they know they've got an initial knock on the Deadeye's guys. So with 3 players pushing across, it's still 3v3. So this fight kind of comes out. Nades here, nades there, nades everywhere across the board. Deadeye's guys have another player kind of knocked down, so they're down to 2. Raw know this. This is an isolated team fight, and initially Shifu gets a knock onto one of them, but blah 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 walks out the door and gets a knock. And at this point, Raw should be thinking, okay, there's one more player, and they still have someone in the back line, right? Across the road. In no way, shape, or form, in my opinion, should he be staying there. He should instantly be running across the road. Now, I know Raw still had 2 players knocked, so it was technically kind of 1v1 in terms of in this compound. But to me, he should have been sending it across the road, join up with his team, get the heals, or go for the engagement on the last player from Deadeye's. As it happens, and he knew that the last player from Deadeye's is there. Instead, the 4th player from Raw is going in kind of the opposite direction to get a vehicle to join up with the rest of his team. That's kind of time wasted. On top is able to get in the vehicle and he disengages away. It's not the worst thing in the world, because again, credit to Raw. It was a good engagement, was great proactivity, but that extra kill point, the extra kill of that squad wipe, can do big things. So, great, but it could be better. This next clip of Game 5 is just to highlight the change in Zeus and how kind of strong they were in this final game. They come in and they get a kill onto... no, this is a... In this clip, I want to highlight what is a weakness from Paradox, but also a fantastic level of proactivity from Zeus. You got phase 3 is shifted, and it's a bit of an unusual shift, a little bit unexpected, where mansion building is quite heavily in play in the mansion compound. And Zeus get a knock onto one of the Paradox players, which is great. But for Paradox, look at the spread they have across the buildings. They've been here since, I believe, phase 2. And you've got 45 seconds, over 45 seconds into phase 3. And they're in no way, shape, or form up as a 2-2 or 3-1 where they're really able to defend themselves. But they lose a player, and because they're so heavily split in the mansion compound, there's no real response. Now for Zeus, I absolutely love it. They're like, yeah, we're full sending into this building. We're taking this knock. We're taking control of this area. You can do nothing about it. The main reason why Paradox could do nothing about it, because they didn't have the players together. They were too separated. They were too slow and sluggish upon this phase 3. And they paid the price. And for Zeus, yes, it was a little bit, once again, a little bit of luck that the circle kept it on heading towards him in the late game. But it was just a real great sign of their fantastic proactivity throughout this game and holding down this compound. Nobody breached, nobody took the chance. And Zeus, they had it all the way. The last clip for Game 5 is just a little bit of a different perspective for DRS in the final moments of this game. Now, DRS had a fantastic game up until this point. Lots of aggression, lots of proactivity, but they kind of maybe failed to make that last jump to really give it a bigger challenge to Zeus. They'd been in this position for around a minute to a minute and a half, and they knew that Stalwart were on one side, and they knew that Zeus were on the other side, right? So they knew that they were in between two teams. But it's specifically this upcoming moment, this phase 8 has popped up. They've got roughly around 50 seconds or so to move in, right? And it's always very tricky. Don't get me wrong. That's why I said different perspective, right? Because you can't always make the right decision, and sometimes it can be one of two ways. But they had gotten a knock onto one of the Stalwart players. DRS had gotten a knock. Now, Zeus do a great job of recognizing the smoke and going, okay, this is free utility throwing. This is free mini red zone. Instantly, Zeus got a double knock onto the players of Stalwart. That should be the cue. Even if they don't have smokes, but that should be the cue for DRS as a full squad, in my opinion, or as a 3-man team, to send it across as much as possible to Zeus. The reason why is because off the back of those two knocks, Zeus are a little bit more focused on Stalwart. They're a little bit more focused on executing those knocks and turning them into kills. But instead, DRS continue to look in the direction of Stalwart. They've got 25 seconds. They've got to try and move in. But unfortunately, because Zeus confirmed those kills, the moment has ended. You've lost your opportunity to really kind of maybe push on a slightly distracted Zeus. It wouldn't have been the most distracted because the way Zeus had this building positioned as a squad was very strong. But just that kind of time frame of 5 seconds or so, to me, you know, was missed from DRS. At this point in the game, Zeus know that Stalwart only have maybe one player. It's not as much of a focus. So they can firmly look in the direction of DRS, who are starting to throw the smokes out. Just be aware that a little bit of extra difference can go a long way. It could have for DRS. Either way, great game from them and great game from Zeus as well. So that was my analysis video for the third day of the Super Weekend, and I suppose that concludes the first week of the PMPL South Asia. Once again, thank you so much to everybody for the feedback, for the love and support when it comes to these videos. I'm going to try and do my best to have videos for next week as well, to try and keep up to date, but I am very busy myself. Sorry if I sound a little bit tired as well. I'm recording this currently at 4:20 in the morning. Hey. So, have a lovely day, evening, wherever you are. Stay safe, look after yourselves, and thank you very much for watching.